My name is Naeem Badiou Zaman and I work with Strive UK. We are a British Muslim organization involved in quite a few activities, not limited to things like advocacy to organizing events and partnering with other solidarity organizations. Our objective remains building up a just society for all. We are very happy to invite every single one of you and thank you for joining us for our regular Tahfakkur series where we invite people who have extensive experience in the work that they do in the communities both here and outside the United Kingdom. Today we are exceptionally privileged to have with us a very important individual whose work has been groundbreaking, transformational, and we'd like to invite Dr. Anas Tikriti, who is the CEO of the Qutb Foundation, to speak to us on a very important subject, which is unfortunately also a bit tragic. All of us understand what has happened in the past few weeks, where we've had hugely insidious Islamophobic riots and a concerted campaign aided and abetted by several politicians and media commentators. So the subject for today is actually the far right in the United Kingdom and where British Muslims stand. Inshallah, in the next 40 minutes or so, Dr. Anas will speak to us analyzing what has happened, a bit of context and history, and very importantly, how is it as a community we need to view and combat such hate. The first session of his conversation will be 40 minutes, followed by 20 minutes of a Q&A session. I invite all of you to please feed in your questions in the chat, and Dr. Anas will do his best to answer them. For those who have just joined, welcome. This is also to let you know that the discourse will last 40 minutes, followed by 20 minutes of Q&A. You are invited to feed in and type in the questions in the chat during the session, and Dr. Anas will do his best to answer them. And now for the program to begin, Dr. Anas, I invite you to speak to us today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. My dear brother Naeem, and all the brothers and sisters from Strive UK, my dear brothers and sisters who are attending this session, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a pleasure being with you once again, and it's always a privilege and an honor to be working with organizations such as Strive UK, which does such brilliant work across the country. And today we'll be talking about something which I'm pretty sure is on the minds of most people, if not everyone. And that is what we've been seeing over the course of the past few weeks particularly, but generally speaking, over the course of the past few years. And before I start, I'm going to share my screen just so that, Bismillah. Now, the very first thing I'd like to mention, there are probably three points that I'd like to set as an overlay. The first is that what we are going through, albeit incredibly tough and very difficult, extremely challenging, but at the same time, this is an experience that our predecessors and their predecessors have also endured and gone through. Whether it be the attempt to transform host societies, making them friends, making them allies, collaborating on matters of good, forbidding what is evil, or in terms of trying to assert Islam and the presence of Muslims as actual players within the structure and the construct of societies in order to make them better, to make them prosper. Let's not forget that essentially everything we do out of our belief that our endeavor as Muslims is similar to what Shu'aib alayhi salam in Surah Hud, when he responded to his people who got tired of him, calling them to worship Allah alone, calling them to be fair in terms of their trade dealings, and they decided to expel him and his family. And he responded by saying, "In uridu illa al-islaha mastata'at." All that I want is your reformation, your betterment, your development, your improvement in as much as I can. وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. And my success is but from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is our endeavor, my dear brothers and sisters, Islah. And the fact of the matter is that Islah, which encapsulates and includes change, includes reformation, includes transformation, is something which people don't like. They don't take too easily. When the Prophet ﷺ came and declared the message that had been revealed to him, to the people of Mecca, they refused, they rejected. In fact, they fought him tooth and nail, and they tried to eradicate him and his companions and the message that they were carrying. Not because it was a bad message, but because change is something that is where people are generally avert to any elements of change in their lifestyles and their beliefs and their ways and their traditions. It's much easier just to do things as the predecessors did and the such. Inna wajadna aba'ana ala ummah wa inna ala atharihim muqtadun. This is how we found our forefathers doing, and we are just doing just like they are doing. So this is something that we're facing today, and we're going to be discussing inshallah in the next few minutes. This is something that we mustn't see as being something extraordinary that only ourselves have gone through. This is something that our forefathers and their forefathers have endured, and wherever Muslims travel, try to settle, try to thrive, try to build their families, try to establish their homes, east, west, north, south, it was exactly the same. So this is one thing I'd like to talk about. The other thing that I think it's important to assert is that in a way, the fact that British Muslims, or Muslims in generally across Europe and faraway countries, are being oppressed so much is a testament to the faith that we carry, is a testament and credit to the values that we want to promote, is a testament to our own endeavors and our own involvement in public life. Because if, we didn't matter, we didn't make a change, we didn't make any impact on our reality, no one would care. But the fact is that Islam is a message, and those who are entrusted with delivering the message, i.e. Muslims, those who feel responsible enough to do as the prophets and messengers of Allah did, you will find that there will be those who fight tooth and nail to reject, to refuse, to eliminate, to oppress, because they can see how you are making a change, you are making an impact. So in a way, and I don't mean this literally, but we should see this challenge to Islam and Muslims across the world as being something to the credit, something that is a testimony to not only Islam as the message of truth, but also as Muslims who are trying their best in order to reform, to make things and reality better, not only for themselves, but for everyone else. And the final message is this: Islam, my dear brothers and sisters, is nothing to be ashamed of. Is nothing, and I'm sure that when I'm saying these things, I'm saying something which is quite obvious, but no, this is something we need to tell our children, and we need to educate, and we need to tell others. Islam is the only message, is the only religion, is the only philosophy that calls upon its followers to care for everyone equally, to eradicate injustice from everyone, including those who are their enemies. ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. Do not let the wrongdoing of others lead you to injustice. If someone is a bad neighbor, don't ever think of dealing with them in a bad way. اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. Be just. Justice is the essence of Islam. That is closer to taqwa, to piety, to being aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only Islam does that. In Surah Al-Isra, verse number 70, we read, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Verily, we have honored and dignified the children of Adam. Everyone, regardless of their faith, of their belief, of their disbelief, of their culture, of their attitudes, of their backgrounds, of their ideologies. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has deemed every single human being, even if they were enemies of Allah, even if they claim to be atheists who disbelieve in Allah, they are honored and dignified by virtue that Allah has created them. That's only in Islam. In our holy book, which, by the way, Sister Fariha, mashallah, tabarakallah, that recitation was tabarakallah brilliant. And the verses that you chose were very, very aptly chosen. In the Quran, speaks to non-Muslims just like it speaks to Muslims. We read in the Holy Quran, Ya ayyuhan nas, O people. Ya ahl al-kitab, O you who follow one of the books. As well as Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. So in the Holy Quran itself, it addresses non-Muslims. It addresses those who are Christians and Jews. It addresses those who are living on this earth. And that's only for Islam. So Islam brings teachings, guidance, and huda, truth and guidance to everyone, to make life better for everyone. That is the pursuit of Islam, and that is the pursuit of us Muslims. However, today we're going to talk about the challenge that we face in this particular country, but we can extrapolate this across Europe and in America and Australia, in various other countries. And obviously we know, coming essentially from India, what kind of challenges face Muslims over there by the rise of Hindutva, nationalism and the like. But that's maybe for another session. Today we're going to be talking about the far right and Islamophobia in this particular country. Bismillah. So where are we? Let's first of all try to understand what is happening around us, because unless we understand where we stand, we can't move. If I don't know where I am, I don't know whether I should go this way or this way or this way. I need to know first and foremost where I am. Even when I'm using Google Maps, the first question it'll ask, where are you? Either it'll identify my location, or I need to put in where I am standing so they can say, okay, this is what you need to do. So the first thing is, we need to understand where are we. The first thing that I think is well known to everyone is that there is an increase in far-right racism and Islamophobia in Europe and the UK. This is something that, unfortunately, we are facing. In Europe, a few months ago, there was the European parliamentary elections, and we saw how racist far-right parties from across Europe, they made incredible gains, almost unprecedented. And quickly, that was followed by a spike in racism in France, as well as in Austria, in Germany, in Holland, in Belgium, as well as here in the UK. So the fact is, and this is undeniable, this is something that everyone acknowledges, and that is that we are seeing an increase in far-right racism, as well as in Islamophobia in Europe and the UK. And even more, it's not just an increase meaning there are louder voices or there are greater numbers of racists. What we are facing now is the added challenge that we have a racist party, a far-right racist party, that has 5 seats in parliament. Now, that never happened in the past. Whether it was in the past, it was the BNP, or they never had Nigel Farage. This was his 8th attempt at the elections, and only now did he win. He constantly lost. But now he has a seat in parliament. That's a challenge, and that's a threat. And this is important. Obviously, we have a new British government. By the way, just before I come to this is something which is incredibly important, and I might mention this later on, but just in case I forget. When I say that Islamophobia or racism or the far right, they are a challenge, I don't mean they are a challenge to Muslims. I mean they are a challenge to everyone. They are a challenge to everyone, Muslim and non. You saw how when the racists rioted either in Southport or in other cities, they broke down the shops and the restaurants of people who weren't Muslims. They might have been Sikhs, they might have been Hindus, they might have been ordinary people, but they thought they were Muslims. They looked brown, so they assumed they are Muslim. And they were hurt, they were damaged. Many Uber drivers who were attacked, their cars were wrecked. Turned out they weren't Muslims at all. So Islamophobia is something that threatens everyone, the peace and security of everyone. When in August, when they threatened to come and demonstrate and riot in our towns and cities, I remember all the shops, all the restaurants, all the pharmacies, everyone, they closed from 3 p.m., 3-4 hours before the racists were threatened that they would come to town. That impacts everyone. That hurts everyone. So racism and Islamophobia, I mean, when we talk about Islamophobia, of course, we're talking about racism directed towards Muslims, but we must understand that Islamophobia impacts and affects everyone. Of course, we have a new British government, we have a Labour government, which we assume is going to be better than the previous government. But better by how much? We don't know. It might be better by just a little bit. It might be much, much better. We need to give it a little bit of time. But generally speaking, I would suggest that part to blame for the spike and the emergence of far-right racism is the last Labour government under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, just like it was the former government or the previous government under Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives. And I'll come to that. Of course, we have increasing numbers of migrants arriving. Every day there are hundreds, literally hundreds of boats coming in from France, from the French shores across the English Channel, trying to reach Britain. Now, we can discuss why that is. We can discuss who these people are. We can discuss, under what circumstances. We can discuss the issue of gangs who arrange for people to be trafficked in this particular way, threatening their lives and threatening the lives of children and the such. But generally speaking, one of the main reasons why we have increasing numbers of migrants is because our country, as well as many others, are involved in creating chaos and instability and poverty and deprivation in the countries where these migrants come from. They fail to find opportunities to live. They fail to find jobs. They fail to find security. They fail to find any potential to study, to prosper, to establish their families. And therefore, they come looking for a place where they assume that they will be able to achieve all those dreams. So one of the reasons why there are migrants who are risking their lives, getting on flimsy boats, crossing the chopping seas in order to get here, not because we have lovely weather, although alhamdulillah today was nice, not because we have money spread amongst people and everyone is rich, not because of all of that, but because we have made their homelands almost unlivable. That's why. So in a way, it's tied together and we need to address this issue. Also, we are now almost 1 year on from Gaza. And the pro-Palestine, not only UK-wide, but global campaign has been going on now for almost 1 year. It's very difficult to imagine But now this genocide against our brothers and sisters in Gaza, and now wider on Palestine, probably even in Lebanon now, has been going on for a year, one whole year. And this is something that I believe has an impact on the level of Islamophobia and racism that we see. Now, what are the reasons for the rise of the far right? We have socioeconomic factors. The fact is, my dear brothers and sisters, that in Western societies, whenever the economy dips, whenever there is increased unemployment, whenever people don't find the opportunities to save and to enjoy life, enjoy their holidays, enjoy buying their houses, for instance, paying their bills, they move to the right. They become more anti the foreigner, or whoever the government and the media tell them, oh, that person is the reason for your troubles. You can't find a job? It's because of the migrants. You can't enjoy a holiday? It's because of the migrants. You can't pay the bills? It's because of the migrants. So socioeconomic factors are part and parcel why there is a rise in the far right. You will find that, I wouldn't say all, but the majority of racists who went on the rampage and created the havoc that we saw, burning cars, breaking shops, and the like, and attacking mosques and Islamic centers and Muslims, you'll find the majority of them are poorly educated and living in deprived economic conditions. Now, that's not a sort of a carpet judgment. I'm not making a general sweeping judgment here. What I'm saying is that you will find that these are reasons why you find these people all of a sudden angry and expressing racist tendencies. This isn't born. People aren't born racists. You find if you leave your children with other children, white, black, whoever, they'll play. They don't see the color. To them, they are children. They are their friends. But we grow up listening to our parents and our family in social settings, learning from school, watching the media, then hearing people of authority, and we become impacted. And then we become racist, or we become xenophobic, or become anti so and so and so. So this is something which is important. Also, Islamophobic narratives and racist tropes are adopted now by the mainstream. You see, and this is, by the way, one of the biggest problems we face, and one of the biggest reasons why we have the rise in racism and particularly Islamophobia. You see, in every human society, whether it be in India, whether it be in Iraq, my home country, whether it be in America, whether it be in Switzerland, whether it be in South Africa, anywhere around the world, any human society has an element who hates the other. A few people who are racists, who think they are the best, who hate it when other people come and live comfortably in their country. They think they're being stolen from. Every society, those are the racists. Even during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when some of his Sahaba who belonged to different Arab tribes, when they one day were joking with each other about which tribe beat which tribe in the past before Islam, and then all of a sudden it became an argument and a quarrel, and voices started to rise and people started to threat, no, we are better, we are better. And the Prophet ﷺ came to them and warned them, and he said, "Da'uha fa innaha muntina." Leave this. This is polluting. This pollutes. This ruins. This creates a rot. He warned his own Sahaba never ever to feel that they are better than others. That they are, and that's why we have in the Holy Quran I'll remember now, but we read from the Holy Quran and the Hadith how لا فضل لعربي على أعجمي إلا بالتقوى. An Arab has no favor, is not preferable over a non-Arab, apart from in terms of piety and closeness to Allah. That is the only reason, that's the only measure. Apart from that, color, language, creed, lifestyle, education, all of this doesn't matter. What matters is your relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, but the problem is where? And this is what we're facing, and we've been facing now for several years. When this minority, what they say, is picked up and adopted by the mainstream. So all of a sudden, when you hear someone who's a racist, known to be a racist, when they speak racist things, just leave them alone. However, when the Prime Minister starts to speak in racist terms, we have a big problem. When the newspaper that is read by millions of people up and down the country uses racist headlines or Islamophobic headlines, then we have a problem. Because all of a sudden, that racist narrative, which is on the margins of society, has now become part of the mainstream. This is a huge problem. And this is what we've been facing now for many years. Misinformation. And you saw how the riots in Southport started when someone spread a rumor that the killer of those 3 girls, that crime, that heinous, horrible crime, where someone stabbed several people, children as well as teachers, and killed 3 and injured many others, it was spread that he was a Muslim, his name was Ali, and he was a migrant. So all of a sudden, those racists, they fabricated the story from this tragic event and attached it to migrants and Muslims, Muslim migrants, and gave it a name called Ali. So, and on social media, people started saying, enough is enough, and we need to go out, and we need to stop these people, and we need to. So people left their homes and hit the streets and burnt cars and shops and streets and blocked the way for police cars to enter. And all of this because they were misinformed. Not only because obviously there was a tendency, there was an acceptance, but misinformation had a big role to play in what was created. Also, anti-Muslim elements collaborating. We know and we realize that within society, we have those who hate us, who hate what we do, who hate that we act as one, who hate that we have such an impact, who hate that we organize in such a brilliant way, who hate that we have so many organizations and we involve all facets of society. They hate the fact that we are so organized and so diligent. They hate all of this. They hate that we carry the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore we have many enemies. Of course. We have the Zionists, we have the racists, the white supremacists who believe that the Aryan race is the best and we are nothing. Those who fear Islam and think that there is some cultural war that they are involved in and that we are the tools with which this war is fought and therefore they are against us. So what they do is they collaborate. One thing which is extremely strange is that the far right, which takes its mantra, takes its main values from fascist movements across the past 150 years, Nazism, fascism, and Nazism was essentially against the Jews of Europe. So how could the Zionists and the racists come together? How? It just doesn't make sense. But because they feel that the enemy, which is Muslims, is so great, they come together and collaborate. So the enemies who committed a genocide, the Nazis committed a genocide against the Jews of Europe, will come together today in order to counter, as they see it, the Muslims of today who are taking over society. That's what they say. And also, it's important to note, and this is not something that I'm going to apologize for, nor something that we should be ashamed of. And that is, Muslims are indeed making an impact on most levels of society, in most areas and sections of society, whether it be in medicine and the NHS, whether it be in engineering, whether it be in science, whether it be in literature, whether it be in arts, whether it be in the media, whether it be in sports, whether it be on every single level. And that increases the racist rage within those who don't know any better, or who can't think beyond hatred, who can't see the benefit that is brought to all of society because of these people. So these are some of the reasons, and I'm sure that we can all come up with many. Now, what's Islamophobia? Unfortunately, Islamophobia, and this is what I said about the previous Labour governments from 2000 onwards. It's almost as though it's the official government policy. Islamophobia is something that I would suggest every single government since 2000 has practiced almost as an official policy, to varying degrees, of course. Tony Blair is not the same as Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is not the same as Rishi Sunak, but generally speaking, Islamophobia is something that is now ingrained in the practice, policy standpoint, as well as statements and discourse of governments towards its Muslim community. Obviously, 9/11, what happened in 2001, and the subsequent war on terror, and the securitization of British Muslims, all of that led to an increased sensitivity, at least, and sometimes fear, and often hatred of Muslims. The story that it was Muslims who committed 9/11, the story that it was Muslims who did the 7/7 bombings in 2005 here in London. And therefore, we need to be suspicious of British Muslims who run shops, restaurants, takeaways, as well as businesses, banks, GPs, dentistry, surgeries, all of these. We need to be suspicious of them. And the securitization of British Muslims, treating Muslims as though we need to deal with them as suspects who need to prove that they are innocent. That's something, Muslims who travel, Muslims who go through airports, Muslims who go into business, Muslims who do bank transfers. We need to check on them. That increased this phenomenon of Islamophobia and made others think, well, if the government does this, then it's okay if we do it. The government must know something. Also, obviously, the wars, Afghanistan and Iraq. The impact on Britain itself is immense. I remember a study back maybe 12, 13 years ago, which was looking at the far right, that said one of the main causes of Islamophobia and racism towards Muslims is that there are thousands of troops, British troops, who served in Afghanistan, who served in Iraq, who killed, who saw their friends and colleagues being killed and shot at, who left their families behind here in Britain in order, because they were told, oh, we're going to build a democracy, we're going to help these people, and they face so much opposition to their occupation. So when they come back, after a few months or probably even years of being in that horrific situation, they come back and the first thing they find is the similarly looking people meeting them at the airports, in the shops, and the taxis, everywhere they look, working in the offices. And this has a mental impact on them. And this makes them return to the state of shock and trauma that they felt on the front lines. Also, police measures, authorities, and institutional racism. Stop and search, where Muslims, especially our sisters in hijab, being stopped more than others. And obviously, when people are passing by outside a busy tube station, and they see the police who are trusted to be, trustworthy and the like, stopping a sister in hijab, what will they think? They won't think, oh, they're just checking and she'll be on her way soon. No, they'll say, oh, she must have done something. Or someone who looks like a Muslim, a beard, a backpack, young man, brown skinned or the such. Oh, they must have done something. That's what those hundreds of people passing by will think. They won't think, oh no, the police have got it wrong and that person has nothing to answer for. That's not the immediate impression that comes to mind. I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to try to finish quickly. Now, what needs to happen? First of all, the government needs to adopt a very clear definition of Islamophobia. Islamophobia needs to be seen as a crime, and a crime not only against Muslims, a crime against society. And the government needs to adopt that definition as a policy, as a law, not something that it plays politics with. Oh yes, we'll legislate for Islamophobia if you vote for us, and once you vote for us, oh no, it's too difficult. No, we need to have this enshrined in law. We need to have a regulated register of Islamophobic incidents. We have a few now, but I feel that we need something far more efficient, and not put the onus only on Muslims to report the crimes, because many Muslims I know, although that someone looks at them and says something, because they are Muslim, they'll just say, oh, these are idiots, we'll just let it go. We need a system whereby we know, society understands that this is a problem, and so many thousands of incidents are happening on the streets of Britain every single year. Everyone needs to know this. Also, there needs to be a comprehensive engagement between the government and UK Muslims. For years now, the British government, whether Labour or whether Conservative, unfortunately has been dealing with the Muslims in the UK on the wrong premise. The biggest Muslim organisation that has the membership of hundreds of mosques, schools, Islamic centres, organisations, youth, women, everything, is the Muslim Council of Britain. Now for over 18 years almost, probably 20 years, governments have refused to engage with the Muslim Council of Britain. Why? Because the Muslim Council of Britain supported the Palestinians and their right to exist in freedom and on their land. Why? Because it was against the British government in its wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Why? Because it criticized government policy on various issues pertaining to Muslims. You know what? We won't talk to you. That's not the way for a government to deal its own citizens. Let's not forget, Muslims aren't foreigners. We are talking about my own children are born and bred and raised and educated and employed here in this country. They're not immigrants anymore. Khalas, I was the immigrant 52 years ago. They're not. And their children won't be. So they can't treat them as outsiders. So this is something that the government needs to change, how it engages with Muslims. You can't say, no, I'm going to find my own Muslims who I like to hear. I like what they say. I like that they agree with me on my policies. I'm going to talk to those Muslims. I'm sorry, but those Muslims you're talking to don't represent. They don't know the mosques. They don't know the Muslim communities. They don't know the issues. They don't know the problems, and they don't have the keys to solving the problems of society as a whole. The prevent strategy must be scrapped, and I don't mean reformed, and I don't mean reviewed, and I don't mean wallahi, let's look at it again. No, it must be scrapped. It's a bad, evil strategy, and I don't care what the government says, because in many occasions, government ministers and the media, they go after whoever criticizes prevent. Prevent is a bad strategy, and we need an entire session just to talk about prevent. Muslims must educate themselves on Islamophobia and the law. We must know what Islamophobia is, what it looks like, how it sounds, and what is the law, and how we can refer to the law in order to protect all of society from Islamophobia. Also, we need an investigation as to how and why the far right is growing. Because if today they have 5 seats in Westminster, we must make sure that the next election in I don't know how many years, they don't become 10 seats and then 20 seats and then 50 seats, and then they become the government of the land. That's something that we must investigate now to see who has failed, who is responsible for this, and how we can stop this from impacting everyone, including the economy, security, society, everything that pertains to life in Britain. Now, what are the future prospects? I personally, and these, by the way, these are my own views. These are predictions based on facts that we have today and based on what I've said. But please feel free to disagree, because I don't have information. I don't have someone who is telling me anything. I don't have wahi. So these are what I expect will happen. The first is, I expect matters to get tougher. I expect things to get very, very hard. Because, unfortunately, albeit sometimes I hear some minister saying something positive, but governments are not being serious about dealing with this problem. Because out of all the issues that face us, and we face immense problems economically, socially, politically, on every level, but this is one of the greatest problems and troubles to face all of society. Once again, all of society, not just Muslims. Second, I expect Zionists, racists, and anti-Muslims to collaborate. They will continue to come together. And we saw how many reports, proven by evidence, show that the far right was paid for by Israelis, by Zionists. Tommy Robinson spends weeks every single year holidaying in Tel Aviv. How is this? This is not a coincidence. And now, because of Gaza and because of the demonstrations that are hundreds of thousands strong every single week, there is now this coming together of those racists and Zionists, as well as others who hate Muslims, collaborating, albeit they are different than each other, but collaborating in order to fight and counter Muslims. We need stricter I think we will get stricter financial regulations on Muslim organizations, and particularly charities. This is something we all need to be aware of. Those of you who know me know that now for the past 10, 11 years, I personally have been facing immense difficulty in opening bank accounts, having many of my bank accounts being closed, my family, even my children. It's something that, khalas, I've become used to. I've become acclimatized to, but it's something that I think will grow and expand and will hit far, far more people. Also, I believe there will be stricter regulations on Muslim schools and education. And this is something we will also need to face, especially those who run education classes or out of extracurricular sessions or the such in mosques, Islamic centers, or even at homes. They will need to be extremely careful and diligent when it comes to issues such as this. And alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect everyone and to grant us guidance and awareness, as well as the strength and courage to face this head on and in the right and proper way. Jazakum Allahu khairan.
Barakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Jazakallahu alfa khairan for your amazing session today. We are very grateful for what you have shared with us. And as would we expect, there's been a flurry of questions that have come in. I hope we can try and accommodate as much as we can. We also need to end on time. So one question that I would actually start with is, in an environment where Muslim organizations are threatened with, proscription, and the political landscape is becoming more right-wing, borderline Islamophobic. I wouldn't call it borderline, but clearly Islamophobic. What can and should Muslims be doing, if engaging the political system, how so, and what impact do you think we can have on a national level? Or should we, focus on working on organizing within our own communities to work on a local level?
This is a very important question, and I face this question virtually every single time I talk about the Muslim community and about the challenges we face. Should we open up, or should we put our own house in order? That's constantly what we think about. To be honest, it's not an either-or question. We need to put our house in order all the time, make sure that we are organized, make sure that we are law abiding, make sure that all our books are transparent, that there is nothing unbecoming in terms of what we do, how we do it, what we say, how we say it, and the such. There's no question that needs to happen. We also need to build an awareness, an education system within our midst. We need to look after our mosques and Islamic centers. We need to grow as a community. We need to, so absolutely. But at the same time, we are British citizens. This society we belong to, just like our next door neighbors, just like, in fact, the Prime Minister himself. There is no difference whatsoever. And we mustn't be tricked into thinking, well, let's leave the public sphere for now. Let things cool down. We'll build ourselves. We'll be strong. We'll be capable. And then that's a trick. People want us away from public life. They don't want to see us. They don't want to hear us. Once we go back into our homes or mosques or community centers, we've lost. We need to be part of this society. And when we say, and this is something I've been saying time and time again, when I talk about Islamophobia, yes, primarily I'm talking about British Muslims, but I am talking about everyone in this society. Everyone. It includes everyone. Islamophobia is a disease. And by the way, just on this particular point, if I may, Brother Naim, I'm often asked this question, and usually when I go on the media, when I'm on Sky or Channel 4 or the BBC, whenever they wish to invite me, and I speak about the aspect of Islamophobia. And unfortunately, even when I speak to Muslims, this question comes up. So, Mr. Altikriti, what could Muslims do in order to solve the problem of Islamophobia? This is one of the worst questions that either we or others can ask, because we are victims of this form of racism. You don't ask the victim to come up with a solution. And this is something very important. This question is wrong from the premise, from the very outset. It's wrong. We're not asked, what could I do to solve the problem, to make the racist understand that they are wrong? I'm sorry, the racist is ill. The racist is sick. A society that allows for Islamophobia or anti-Semitism, which, by the way, is equally as evil, or any form of racism against blacks, against whoever, is a society that needs to be treated from that illness. You don't ask black people, what should you do in order so that the society is less racist? That's not their problem. It's society's problem. So in the same way, we should also recognize that we are part of this society and we wish for the prosperity of the society. This is the society where my children and grandchildren will grow up. So I want it to be rid of crime. I want it to be economically prosperous. I want it to be free from prejudice and racism and discrimination. I want it to be virtuous, and I want people to live side by side in peace and prosperity for the sake of my children as well as for the children of everyone else. So when we fight Islamophobia, we're not being exclusive here. I want things to be good for Muslims, but I don't care about others. No, that's not Islamic. That's against Islam. So when we want a good health system, it's not because, wallahi, only my mother will need healthcare and I want it to be a good system. No, I need to care for everyone who will need healthcare at any stage of their lives. So this is something which is very important. We do both. We set our houses in order and we work in order to reform and develop societies in which we live.
Jazakallah. Thank you, Adib, for asking that question and starting the session on such a very, very strong point, particularly about the stage of actually the victim being asked to condemn, whereas it is not to be seen as an issue. I'd like to ask you, Dr. Anas, the need for a law to combat Islamophobia has been put on discussion for many years now. So, I mean, are we wrong to say that we don't see Muslim organizations or movements calling for and mobilizing it more vehemently? As far as we know, the government has not constituted any panel for committee to study the reasons for the recent violence. So can Muslim organizations, leaders, and academics constitute such a committee to, investigate and bring forth a report?
That's a very important question. And to be perfectly honest, I'm a little bit torn, Brother Naeem. I'm a little bit torn on this because I'm someone who believes that laws don't solve problems. They help, but they don't solve problems. I'm someone who I don't think that criminalizing as the first step is a solution to the problem. I would rather that we work together in order to reform our education system, to reform our media, to reform the socio-economic conditions of employment, of pay, of all these things, so that society is more relaxed. There's no tension. And then we can start to discuss amongst each other. Why are we different? Why do we believe in different things? What do we bring as Muslims to the table? I would rather that happens. However, unfortunately, we are in a situation where it seems that racists are not, just like I said, they're not on the peripheries and margins of society anymore. They are now in parliament. They are now in power. They have the media. On occasions, they had 10 Downing Street. And therefore, now we must be absolutely radical in terms of what we do in order to address these issues. Because whether we like it or not, there are Muslim communities up and down the country who feel threatened, who are threatened. There are people who are being attacked because of what they wear, because of how they look, because of where they pray or how they pray. And that's something that we cannot accept. And that's why I believe that we need to move quickly in terms of introducing a law which hopefully will bring about a phase where then we can start that kind of quiet, contemplative discussion with others and with each other so that we understand each other better. I agree with you that Muslim organizations ought to lead the way. I agree with you absolutely. But it's not only Muslim organizations. We have, within the Muslim community, we have thousands of organizations of various sorts, whether they be mosques or Islamic centers, youth centers, clubs, schools, charities, companies. We have thousands. We have a civil society structure like no other, especially that we are guided by our faith as well as our values that make us even more impactful and more effective. So it's not only Muslim organizations. I believe that we have now, probably because sometimes Palestine, sometimes anti-racism and fascism, we have now a network of friends across society. So this needs to be an effort, not brought only by Muslims. It needs to be brought by all sections of society. We have even some ministers who have spoken well. We have some officials who have spoken well. We have police commissioners who have spoken well. We have councillors up and down the country who have spoken well, not necessarily Muslims. We need to utilize all of these contacts in order to bring about, ultimately, not laws against Islamophobia, but a state where society does not discriminate against any other within its midst. That's what's important.
Thank you, Dr. Anas. But I would also imagine that, such a situation would actually be a lot more effective if there is a law with teeth, because some of these societal changes are also not just brought in by changes that have a pace and is dependent on the goodwill only wider community, but also the goodwill of the people who are actually perpetrating. So there will be a case for when laws need to be, perhaps one could have a discussion on the way we approach the discussions and the rollout of the law, but the law in itself is the only thing that actually gives teeth and cover and protection to several of these efforts, right?
I can't agree more. I agree absolutely. I agree absolutely. I mean, the last thing we need is something that looks like a law or is called a law, but really has no impact whatsoever. That's the last thing we need. Because what it'll do, from one side, it'll antagonize the racists even further. From the other side, it'll make people feel comfortable. Oh, we have a law in place. But in reality, nothing changes. In fact, there are even more vicious attacks from the racists, and there is more complacency from those who should be doing more in order to protect all of society, but specifically the victims of Islamophobia. And we have a law, but it means nothing whatsoever. So I agree with you.
Okay. So you mentioned an important point about educating Muslims on Islamophobia. So I was wondering, given the resources that are there, is the madrasa system, as we know it, being properly utilized? And is there an opportunity? And continuing on madrasa, given being it an effective school system, you also mentioned prevent. We are seeing a rise in Islamophobic attacks on our children at schools and colleges across the country. We've actually heard stories from a lot of parents on this very call and from their children themselves. So, are there actions that we can take to educate and support our students? So two things. One, is there an opportunity that we're missing through our madrasa networks? And two, is there an action that we should take and educate and support our students with the issue around prevent?
Both questions extremely important. And the issue of madrasas, I think we have, the important point here is that we have the structure to educate our young as well as parents on the issues of Islamophobia, what it looks like, how they should respond, and what we can do on the long term. So we have the network, whether it be through madrasas, whether it be through our mosques up and down the country. We have over 2,900 mosques, mashallah. So imagine we have hundreds of thousands, probably nigh on 1 million people every single Friday sitting and listening to the khatib, to the Friday khatib, as we will inshallah tomorrow. But very few of those are actually being utilized in order to address issues such as these, which are incredibly important to every single person, every single one of us. The madrasa system, I feel, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my latest encounter, which was several years ago, with a number of madrasas, showed that the conditions weren't conducive to offering a proper, enlightened education to students or their parents regarding something like this. I didn't feel that it was conducive to that. So we need to think, how can we utilize this incredible network up and down the country, where thousands upon thousands of our children go every single week, sometimes several times a week? How can we utilize this to build this awareness as well as this resilience towards Islamophobia and all forms of racism? That's a very, very important point. In terms of prevent, to be perfectly honest, Brother Naeem, and I have to say, only yesterday, I recorded my podcast, The London Circle, with Dr. Layla Ayat Al-Hajj, who's one of the directors of Prevent Watch. And we had a 55-minute discussion, which hopefully will come out in the next day or two, on Prevent. And it is horrific. It is horrific. The impact that Prevent has, the whole that Prevent has on our children, on those who have to go to a GP, on those who are somehow reported because of what they wear, what they say, what they think, on the freedom of children to express themselves, to ask questions, to speak their minds. That is all being stifled. It was horrifying what I heard from Dr. Layla yesterday. And to be perfectly honest, I am now not sure that our sort of plaster treatment of what is a huge problem is sufficient. We need leaders of the Muslim community. We need mosque imams. We need intellectuals. We need academics. We need friends from across society, because this doesn't only impact Muslims. We need people to come together to think, how could we get rid of this disease that is now not only hitting our society, but threatening to spread around the world? Because they want Prevent to be adopted by all countries around the world. And this is a catastrophe. If ultimately children are told by their parents, please don't say this, don't talk about Gaza, don't talk about you being a Muslim, don't, sending them shivering and shaking because they can't speak their mind, they don't know what to say, they don't know how to speak to their friends at school. This is catastrophic. We're creating generations of people who can't think for themselves, who can't act freely, who can't develop, who can't plan, who can't strategize. They can't, because they are so scared, so stifled, wary of the other. The people whom they trust most, their teachers and head teachers, can't be trusted anymore. This is an issue which we need to start discussing as soon as possible. And we need to tell the governments in no uncertain terms, regardless of what the media says regarding whoever criticizes Prevent. Prevent is an evil strategy that needs to be absolutely eradicated, totally eliminated, totally uprooted. And all those who propose that we spread Prevent, that we increase the capacity of Prevent, they need to be sent to the courts of law and to be held before accountable for their way of thinking and way of approach, which is destroying the future generations of not only our country, but of various countries, numerous countries around the world.
Thank you, Dr. Anas. And this was a very, very important point, I think, that we ended. And inshallah, I would like to believe that, this actually warrants a session on its own, particularly the sort of, because they happen to impact a very vulnerable demographic who also happen to be the future of our community. So it is important that their interests are paramount in the way we think of what the future is ahead of us. On behalf of Strive UK and everyone on this call, I would like to thank you. And I would like to thank all our guests who have joined today and for the questions that have been fed to us. And inshallah, we look forward to working together, to mobilizing communities and making this a better community, society, and a better place for not only for us, but also for the future. With this, we end the call, and wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakum Allah khair, everyone at Strive UK, all the brothers and sisters here today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all and guide us all to doing better and to performing better, inshallah. Jazakum Allahu khairan. Thank you so much. Fi amanillah.